Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Today, the entire nation is celebrating the Victory Day. 6th of September in Pakistan's history is remembered as the Defense and the Martyrs Day, when in 1965 Indian forces tried to cross into Pakistan's territory but were befittingly responded by well-equipped and well-trained Pakistan's armed forces. Instead of accomplishing their goal of enjoying drinks at Lahore Gymkhana, Indian forces lost territory to Pakistan. The entire nation stood resolute, shoulder to shoulder with the brave armed forces of Pakistan, and inflicted a crushing defeat on the Indians. Today, the day dawned with a 31-gun salute in the federal capital and 21-gun salute in each provincial capital in the country. On this occasion, a caretaker Prime Minister, Mr. Anwarul Haqqaqar, after laying the floral wreath at Yadgar-e-Shuhada at Pakistan Monument, said, let me quote, "Our martyrs who embraced martyrdom for the sake of the people and the country can never be forgotten and will always remain in our hearts," unquote. Likewise, in his message on this occasion of the Defense and the Martyrs Day, President Dr. Arif Alvi said, let me quote, "The 1965 war stands out in our history as a symbol of unwavering national resolve, preparedness, professionalism, patriotism, and sacrifice," unquote. Also, according to Inter-Services Public Relations, the country's military leadership has said that on September the 6th, 1965, it was yet again displayed that a smaller but righteous force overcame a numerically larger enemy with professionalism, determination, and faith. In today's program, we'll be refreshing the memories of the great victory by the armed forces of Pakistan in the 1965 war against India, and the kind of national resolve and the support the armed forces got from the nation, the entire nation. Will be refreshing the memories of that particular victory and that war. For that, we are honored and really privileged to be joined by a very esteemed panel of guests in the studio as well as online. In the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Vice Admiral, retired Ahmad Tasnim. He is 1965 war veteran. He was ADC to President of Pakistan from 1961 to 63. During 1965 war, he was second in command of the PNS Ghazi. In 1971 war, he was commander of the submarine Hangur, which sank Indian ship Kukri, and he has been awarded Sitare Jurat twice. Vice Admiral, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Also in the studio, we're honored to have been joined by Lieutenant General retired Raza Muhammad Khan, former president of the National Defense University, also been conferred upon with Hilale Imtiaz Military. General Raza, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. On Skype, we are being joined by Air Marshal retired Ashfaque Arain. He is director at the Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. He's been awarded with Tamga Imtiaz Military, Sitare Imtiaz Military, Hilale Imtiaz Military. Air Marshal, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Let me begin with you, Admiral Ahmad. Now let's refresh the memories of 1964. What was the spirit at that time of the entire nation?
Well, I was 30-year-old, so you don't have to be a great mathematician to calculate that I'm just about touching 90. Alhamdulillah, God has kept me for something. I think as a lieutenant what impressed me was the motivation, the resolve, and the love of the nation. Couple of things happened. I had just been married, and I think we were expecting a first child, no telephone, no communication, nothing at all. I walked into, just before sailing, I walked into the DS's office, and I said, I want a telephone call. He said, where are you? I said, I'm in Ghazi. So he got up and opened the door. So I thought he was going to probably throw me out. And he said in Urdu, Lieutenant Saab, aap mulk ka difa kare, hum aapki family ka difa karenge, fikr na kare, chale jaye. So look at the jazba. And when I came back, there was a phone, a demand notice, and here it was. So the jazba was absolutely, you know. And the media, you are from media, the songs and the plays and things like that by Noor Jahan, by Mehdi Hassan, by other Shaukat Ali, this Shakil Ahmad, there was a gentleman, I can't forget his name. He used to actually read the news on radio. There was no television, yeah, a little bit limited on the radio. And the way he would read it, it looks like we were conquering the base, air bases and the territory. Absolutely with Josh. Exactly Josh. So I would say that the nation was 200% behind armed forces in 65 war. And there was tremendous exemplary coordination between the three services. Absolutely. That is my first thing.
So you mean to say the collective response of the armed forces was phenomenal. General Raza, how do you look at the collective response after this aggression by Indian side in 1965?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, you know, I'll endorse what the Admiral has said. And I'd like to add that today is the Martyrs' Day and the day of the defense of Pakistan. And I would call it, you know, the national security of Pakistan as well. If you look at the environment that are prevailing nowadays. And what today, you know, we pay tributes and respects to all the martyrs, I would say starting from the partition in 1947. We lost about 1 million people lost their lives. And thereafter in the Kashmir War of 1948, who got us, you know, the part of Kashmir, which is there with us now, the Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Then, of course, there was the 1965 war, 1971 war, and then, you know, the people who lost their lives on account of terrorism during the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan for 10 years. And, you know, because of the civil war, which was prevalent in Afghanistan for another 5 years. Then very lately, the people who lost their lives during the NATO-ISAF occupation of Afghanistan for over 20 years. And you know, we are still in that fight against the terrorists, which emanated mainly, you know, from whatever happened in Afghanistan. And I think the total number of people that we lost in all our wars with India is really not even 1/10 of what we lost, you know, to terrorists. So I would say we are actually paying tributes and salutes to all those martyrs, you know, who lost their lives, and including children, innocent children. You know, I'm talking of the APS carnage, and we remember them, we are proud of them, we'll never forget them, and I think we sternly believe that, as it is said in the Holy Quran, that they are not dead, they are alive, only we perceive not, and the Almighty is giving them sustenance, and they are very happy with the Almighty. And inshallah, when the time comes, the entire nation you will see that they will put all their differences aside when it comes to the national security or defense of Pakistan. They will defend it collectively together, and the armed forces and the people of Pakistan are going to work hand in glove to do that.
Right. Admiral, when we talk about India's perception of Pakistan's defense at that particular time, why did it take that aggressive measure of trying to cross into Pakistan's territory and launching an attack on Pakistan? Was it a miscalculation regarding the capability, the capacity of the Pakistan's armed forces at that time by Indian side?
1965?
Yeah.
Well, as far as the history is concerned, General Raza can probably dwell more on this. I had just left, I was a UFAN's ADC, and I had just left, so I know a little bit here and there, everything. And now one talk about it, although there are too many acts passed that we can't talk this secret, etc., but we can talk. So from my memory and being on the president's staff, President was convinced to have a limited action in Kashmir, okay, and was also assured that India will not attack on the international borders. But it appears, I met President later, then it appeared this impression went wrong. And India, as a retaliation when you were advancing in Kashmir, attacked you. This is a simple term put in, attacked you at Lahore front, absolutely. But also I would say that we were, as people, this is a propaganda say, we were also prepared. It's wrong, unprepared. If we were not prepared, I was in Ghazi submarine, how would I be on 6th September outside Bombay? I mean, this is the proof. So we were sailed earlier, quietly, people were expecting. So this is, I feel, for a propaganda that we were caught off guard and this and that. The proof is PNS submarine, Ghazi sailed 5 days earlier with, of course, the code word for attack comes later, and we were outside Bombay on 6th September when we got the message and we raised our antenna and heard the speech of President Ayub Khan, which was very, very Joshila, and it gave us a lot of, the ships company also gave us a lot of confidence and, you know, what we say, the motivation. I said, okay, we get it. It was 12 o'clock. So we were well prepared. There was excellent coordination between three services and the government. Absolutely. That's it. So this is how it was. They attacked the international border, and I think maybe there was a miscalculation, but I think the government was expecting.
So what was the most important and worth remembering spell on the naval front by the Pakistani forces?
Sorry?
To thwart Indian design. What was the most memorable spell on the naval front by the Pakistani side to thwart Indian design?
From the naval side, actually, we were also ready because Operation Dwarka, it was planned earlier, because if you have carried it out on 7th and 8th September night, so you can't say that it was planned, it takes time. So obviously it must have planned earlier. So it was actually, I am an elder myself, but it is against my conscience not to talk about the history. And my elders who contributed, they are not with us now, they're all gone. And I would say that in simple terms, this operation was planned by and approved by, at that time, CNC Admiral Arain Khan, who was a very courageous person. He is also founder of submarine service, and then actually undertaken under the command of Pakistan Fleet, which was Commodore Anwar. And these ships, Babur, Khyber, Dhaka, Badr, Jahangir, Tipu Sultan, Shah Jahan, Alamgir, they took part, and their commanding officers who were all gone, God bless them, Captain Lodi, Captain Hanif, Aziz, Commander Malik, Commander Hussain, Commander Amir Aslam, Commander Shamsi, and Commander Qadir. Out of these, Captain Hanif was my training officer. In summary, they all gathered. Dwarka is about 250 nautical miles from Karachi, depending on what route you take. They all gathered 120 nautical miles from Dwarka on 7th at 1800. No detection. Then they put on speed, and in 4 hours, they got to the firing position, which was 5.5 nautical miles of Dwarka. Now, for the benefit of our viewers, the territorial waters are 12 miles. So this is exactly when you really get in and get them. So they got in 7 miles inside their territory, 5 miles, no detection. Each ship fired 50 rounds. There's 350 rounds, gun about 4 inches, 6 inch gun, and then they retrieved, and by the 6 o'clock in the morning, they came back to their position 120 miles. There was no resistance, nothing at all. And the objectives were very simple. First of all was to knock off the radar, which was supplying a lot of guidance to the aircraft attacking our territory from this side. Second was morale. And third was because Ghazi was the only submarine in this region except Indonesia, which had W-class submarine. And Indian fleet would not come out. Vikrant we saw earlier when we were on war patrol in about May, June during Run of Kutch crisis. We saw periscope, etc. But now they were all in harbor. So this was also to coax them, to tell them, look, for God's sake, get out. It worked, and they came out, their ships came out. And then I think off Bombay, I can't recollect exactly the place, of Bombay or Gujarat coast, on 21st September, we attacked one ship. We fired 4 torpedoes. This is Ghazi. Admiral Niazi was the commanding officer. I was second in command. Admiral Niazi is gone also. Very courageous man. I personally owe him a lot. I was, frankly, before serving under him, I was very much of an inbox officer, safe. But having served with him, I learned to be aggressive. I learned to take initiative. I learned to take risk, because this is how it is. You win war. You don't stay in the box. So he fired 4 torpedoes. We all fired. They exploded. They were World War II torpedoes. They are not as harmful or as damaging as the modern torpedo. So the ship got damaged, but they towed it and they repaired it. This is the Ghazi.
Right, Raza, I'll come to you. We have been joined by Air Marshal retired Ashfaque Arain. Also, let me first go to him. Mr. Ashfaque Arain, thank you very much for joining in. The major accomplishments in 1965 war, thwarting Indian design, as far as the Air Force's contribution is concerned.
Okay, thank you. Actually, the major contributions in the 1965 war were first the support for the ground operations of the land warfare, and second, keeping the IF out of the equation. And that was done earlier by Colonel Rafiki when they had shot down 4 vampires. The vampires were put out of service by the Indian Air Force, and that reduced their fighter inventory by almost 30%. So that was one big jolt for the IF. Subsequently, our attacks at different airfields in the along the operational area put those aircraft down and those airfields down for a while, and that is where we were a lot helpful for the ground operations and success of the ground operations, especially stopping in the tank battle and supporting the army there, hitting the Indian tanks in the Chum sector. That was very important on the 6th of September. So overall, I think the Air Force played a very vital role in curtailing the Indian ground offensive, as well as keeping the Indian Air Force out of the equation.
Right. So could you also tell us the kind of spirit there was that was prevalent among the Air Force's personnel at that very particular moment?
I think I'll just give you one example that when number 19 squadron was supposed to attack, the squadron commander gathered all the air crew. He used his perfume, put his perfume in a bucket, and then gave his handkerchief, the wet handkerchief, to everybody to use that, because they were sure that they may not come back. So I think we have heard that story many times. So that was the kind of jazba in the Air Force pilots. Same was true for the technicians and the other members of the Pakistan Air Force, because they were supporting the pilots and the engineers, the technical crew, etc., and the administrative staff. Without their support, all these operations or the missions could not have been possible the way they were done. Right. So, Alhamdulillah, I think Air Force did extremely well, and they were all motivated, and they remain motivated till today.
So was the response surprising for the Indian side at that particular moment in history?
The first surprise was when Colonel Rafiki and Flight Lieutenant Imtiaz Bhatti, 2 of them shot down 4 Mysteers over Chum area, and they had to take off all their Mysteer aircraft out and ground them, and so that was one. The other was when the airfields were attacked and their aircraft were out, not inside the pens but on the hardened surfaces, and they were destroyed in So that was the second surprise for the Indian Air Force. The third was when they wanted to attack Sargodha, and that is where MM got 5 kills in just less than a minute. So I think all these things surprised them. The professionalism, the way the PF pilots could handle their aircraft, and on top of that, I think there was one more reason. The F-104, a Mark II aircraft with a Sidewinder missile, that was again a scary thing for the Indian Air Force.
Right, let me proceed towards General Raza. General Raza, talking about the ground forces, what sort of resolve was prevalent in the ground forces personnel at that particular moment in history? What big damages were inflicted to the Indian side?
Okay, before I answer this question, I think there was a question which you asked the Admiral, and he very kindly said that I may put some more light on that, and that was about a little bit of a background of the 1965 war and some of the reasons how that war started. So I think for that you have to go back to the year 1948, and it will be August, September, when the Maharaja of Kashmir, at that time who was a Hindu and who was dithering, he was given a choice, either to join Pakistan or India, but he was not doing that. So a rebellion started, and as a consequence of that rebellion, he fled from Srinagar and came to Jammu, where the Indian government officials were waiting for him, and they made him sign a fake instrument of accession so that they can flow in their forces into Srinagar, which they did. And then that rebellion continued despite the fact that the Indian forces were there. They got some support from the Azad Kashmir areas, and whatever forces Pakistan had, not more than 2 or 3 battalions after the partition, because at the time of partition, we were supposed to get 36% of the shares when the assets were divided. Out of that, we got only 2%. So you can imagine what was available with us. And once the tribals, they saw that there is a war going on in Kashmir, then they volunteered. We did not have arms and weapons and ammunition. And they came and they asked the GHQ if they are required, the services are required, and they were allowed to go also. And also at that time, when the Indian forces arrived in Kashmir, the then acting commander-in-chief of the Pakistan Army was General Douglas D. Gracie. So the Qaid asked him that, look, the Indians, they have actually attacked Kashmir, and in Kashmir there are 90% Muslims, and the Maharaja should have acceded immediately to Pakistan. He did not, and now the Indian forces have come. So he said that whatever forces you have, you need to go and stop them. But he refused that. And he said, look, I am also the servant of the Queen, and I am serving here now in Pakistan. So whatever we had, the Qaid had to let them go and defend Kashmir against the Indian offensive. So whatever part of Kashmir we have right now, it was because of those actions taken. But then the Indians went to the Security Council, and the Security Council said that the future of Kashmir will be decided through a plebiscite, which never happened. Although Nehru continued to promise the world and Pakistan, he wrote a number of letters to Mr. Liaquat Ali Khan, and even Mountbatten agreed with the plebiscite, and they continued to tell Pakistan, particularly Nehru, till till the time he died in 1956, that there will be a plebiscite. But instead of the plebiscite, they took constitutional measures to try and integrate Kashmir with India. When we are talking of Article 370, 35A and 335, these were the key presidential orders in which they integrated Kashmir, and Pakistan went to the United Nations Security Council in 1964 to protest against that. But I think nobody listened to them, and that resolution was vetoed by the Soviet Union. Unfortunately, in the same period, Nehru died, and they fired Sheikh Abdullah. Bakhshi Ghulam Muhammad was brought in Kashmir, who was forced to sign, that fake instrument of accession, as a consequence of which there was a second rebellion in Kashmir. And that rebellion started, in early 1965. The Indian tried to quell that rebellion, with whatever forces they had there, whatever they are doing now, the same modus operandi. And, as a consequence of that, they started shelling Pakistani positions. They are doing that now also. Whenever they have trouble inside, this is their, their mode. What they say is that they immediately
pattern.
Yes. So they blame Pakistan, and they started doing that. When that didn't work, they captured, some Pakistani territory of Azad Kashmir in the Badori Bulge area. Okay, so Pakistan had to retaliate. Pakistan retaliated a small counterattack opposite the Cham and the Aknoor area, which was a very sensitive area, and had that succeeded, the main line of communications of the Indians could have been cut to Kashmir. Although I agree with what the Admiral said, that the Foreign Office had been telling us that the war there, the land war, will be restricted to Kashmir, and that the international borders will not be crossed. But this is exactly what happened. On the night of 6th December, they attacked Sialkot, they attacked Lahore, they attacked Kasur and Suleimanki with major tanks and infantry efforts. In the Sialkot sector, the biggest tank battle after the Second World War, I think it was the Battle of Kursk in 1943, that was fought there. The Indians brought in 150 tanks there against our initial deployment of only 14 tanks and subsequently 60 or 70 tanks. So all that massive attack was beaten back in the Sialkot sector. They were pushed back to the border, and out of those 150 tanks, over 120 tanks were destroyed by our forces. In the Lahore sector, again they came up to the BRB canal, and they claimed that they've captured Lahore. They even captured, a double-decker bus which used to ply there. Indians did not have that double-decker bus. They showed it to BBC, and BBC actually made an announcement that the Indian forces have captured Lahore. So all these things happened. They could not cross the BRBL, and eventually the Pakistan armed forces then launched their counter-offensive from Khem Karan sector, and they captured the area up to Waltoha, and they actually threatened Amritsar from there, and they threatened the only bridge which was there on the Beas River at that time, the railway bridge and the road bridge. And the Indian army chief actually was so scared that he thought that if Amritsar is severed, then all forces north of that in Sialkot and even in Kashmir, they could be actually trapped. So he ordered its forces facing out a counter-offensive to abandon their positions and redeploy east of the Beas River. But the corps commander there, the Indian corps commander there, he was a Sikh and a bold guy. Now he couldn't have left Amritsar there, so he refused that order for some time. And in the meantime, the discussions about ceasefire started, and the ceasefire occurred, and then the troops had to fall back. But let me tell you that again in that counter-offensive, according to the Indian authors, the Indian senior commanders were so scared that they had removed their uniforms, and they had removed the senior officers, 2-star generals, they had removed the flags on their vehicles, and they would prefer to walk on foot rather than I'm talking of the accounts which the Indian themselves have written there. With that, I just like to add about the support of the international community. While this counter-offensive was going on, unfortunately, the United States and the UK, they applied sanctions on us. Although we were then parts of CETO and CENTO, we were their partners. But that was very unfortunate. And amongst the Muslim countries of the world, I think we got support from Saudi Arabia, our friends from China, from Indonesia, from Iran, and a few other countries. Again, you know, I would say that the support of the people of Pakistan to the armed forces of Pakistan was really exemplary, and I think we could be proud of the moments, you know, of that hand glove kind of interaction that we had there, and because of the bravery of our forces, their morale, their initiative, and the support of the people, I think that was a clear victory for Pakistan.
Let's go to
Actually,
Admiral Ahmad. Okay.
being a student of history, whatever I have learnt, any time on any dispute, if India agrees to have talks, I am absolutely with 100% confidence this is to buy time and not to find a solution. And I give you example. 1962, when the Chinese attacked, there was a lot of pressure on us. It's all declassified now, to make sure that you don't walk into Kashmir and this and that and all that. And cutting the story short, because you don't know what is secret, what's not. India said, oh, okay, so if Kashmir is a thing, we will resolve it and we will start talks. So the talks started between Bhutto Sahab and Swan Singh. Swan Singh was not foreign minister, he was, I think, communication or railway minister. What happened? 10 rounds of talk, result 0. You tell me, from the history point of view, is there any dispute which has been resolved through talks with India? No. Because they only talk for international image and to buy time.
Buy time, exactly.
And this, I think, our policy makers, I'm sure they do that. They must keep it in mind. Either simply to buy time and to lower the temperature. And you will find it from the history. Anytime the things are boiling up, oh, okay, we will talk. The temperature is lowered.
So, Admiral, when we talk about, as General Raza has mentioned, that the Muslim world helped Pakistan out during the 1965 war. So, what was the expectation from the Western side at that particular moment in history? As General Raza has said, that sanctions were put on Pakistan, despite Pakistan being the member of CETO and CENTO.
I will elaborate this by giving an example. PNS Ghazi was loaned to us. We fought with it and we got the sanctions. They would not give us spare part to refit. I mean, 5 years had passed and we had to go all the way, Suez was closed in 67, I was commanding officer at that time, to Turkey to refit our submarine. So what are our expectations? My, again, being student of history is this, in time of crisis, Western powers will not stand by you. They will put sanctions. They are the first one to sanction. Here I've given you an example of Ghazi, where we had sanctioned. It's a life-saving. There were defects, this and that. They sanctioned, no spare part, embargo, blah, blah, blah. And we had to go round the Cape to Turkey. They helped us and refitted Ghazi there.
Right. So, any sort of a protest, was it lodged with the US side at that particular moment in history?
I won't know. That should be asked to Foreign Service. But I think when you lodge protest, I'm a graduate of US Naval War College. And the Americans, later on, I became friendly. So they say, one chap told me, he said, we are very crude. But when it comes to say no, we are super diplomatic. They always say no.
But let me tell you that the protest, actually, the people were not happy, and that led to Pakistan leaving both the CETO as well as the CENTO, because we thought that probably, you know, we got some advantages from that, but at the time when we needed it the most, you know, it didn't work out for us.
So, were any lessons learned afterwards?
Well, if you're talking of the lessons learned, then I think you'll have to also then discuss 1971, where you know, there was an aggression in East Pakistan, and well, we were
Right.
dismembered, and we did not
Raza.
get any support.
1965
Raza.
war. For now, let's talk about Operation Dwarka. So, targeting that radar station of Indian side, how crucial that was for Pakistan?
First of all, just a summary what has been discussed so far. I, as a Pakistani, nearing and a veteran of 2 wars and nearing 90 years, Alhamdulillah, my own conclusion is, when the chips are down, boys, you're on your own. This is my conclusion. It's entirely you get debated. You're on your own. 65 war, let's not forget, 2 nations did help us. Indonesia sent 2 submarines. It is not known. 2 submarines Sukarno sent. And Saudi Arabia also sent 2 or 3 gunboats. So they helped. And Iran also helped us. And so did Turkey. So there, 71 probably not. So now we talk about Dwarka. Dwarka, as I said, that it, I think, met its objective. It raised the morale of Pakistan Navy. It demoralized the Indian Navy, which was our objective. And as a result, their ships did come out. They dared not come and attack Karachi harbor, which they did in 71. They dared not because of the presence of submarine. But their ships did come out and provided opportunity for Ghazi to attack one of them. Yes.
Right. Air Marshal Ashfaque, when we talk about the kind of surprises Indian forces got at that time during the 1965 war, do you think Indian side learnt lessons with the passage of time? Because in the recent past, we also saw them making a misadventure. So, what's your understanding? Did they really learn their lessons from 1965 war or not?
Okay, I think first I'll just mention about sanctions. The first time we were sanctioned by the US was in 1948 after the Kashmir conflict. And then after that it has been an on and off thing till till now. So that is one thing. As far as talking of the Indian Air Force learning lessons, I think they were more towards manipulation. That is one reason that, like General Raza had mentioned, that we did not get the share of our assets. Same was true for the Pakistan Air Force, that we just got 2 squadrons of aircraft, and that those were also not in a good shape. Some of the aircraft which were ferried from India, from Ambala, and they gave a route clearance so as to they had to fly south towards Jaisalmer, from there to Nawabshah, Jacobabad and Mianwali. Well, we all can understand that from Ambala flying direct to Lahore is the shortest route, less than 150 kilometers. And one of the aircraft had a flame out, and we found out at that time that they had put sugar in all the fuel tanks of the aircraft. That is one. So they did not give a share of our assets. In addition to that, they refused to provide training to Pakistan Air Force at the time of the partition. And Pakistan Air Force did not have any training institutions at that time, and Pakistan Air Force did not have any maintenance facilities also. So they all had to be created from zero. Probably they thought that Pakistan Air Force will not be able to respond well, and because of their numbers, continuity in the Air Force from the British time, they were more complacent. As far as learning lessons after the 65 is concerned, I think they did not. Because in 1971 also, again, Pakistan Air Force had only 1 squadron in Dhaka, the number 14 squadron, and it was pitched against 10 squadrons of the Indian Air Force. And it continued to fight, and it gave a total of shot down 26 Indian aircraft on the Eastern Front. And even subsequently, I was in India for 3 years in Pakistan High Commission when they started the scope India exercise with the US. They did not have the even the maps to ferry their aircraft to the US. So I think they were lagging in that aspect, and their training or training with other air forces was also lagging. Pakistan at that time also, even before 65, was Air Force was having training with the Turkish Air Force, with the Iranian Air Force with the USAF, etc., and even the US Navy. And if we see the 2019, probably they did not learn. And I think there's one more aspect, that the Pakistan Air Force, being a smaller force with more responsibility pitched against a much larger adversary, has to be innovative and bring in new ideas. And we have seen over these past 40, 50 years that whatever Pakistan Air Force does, after a few years, we see the Indian Air Force replicating that or copying that. But by that time, Pakistan Air Force gets into a new mode of thinking or new strategy and tactics development. So,
Marshal, when we
I
talk
don't.
about the Indian side didn't learn lessons even after 1965, not even after 2019's misadventure of themselves over here against Pakistan. So how Pakistan Air Force is keeping itself prepared all the time, 24/7, in order to thwart any sort of future misadventure if India resorts to any in future as well?
Okay, I think the foremost thing is that the Pakistan Air Force invests a lot and focuses a lot on training of its personnel and maintenance of its equipment, that is aircraft, radar, and other related equipment. So training is some aspect where I think Pakistan Air Force has probably no match, at least in the region. Our people go abroad also, learn from there, and we adapt to those ideas and specifically adjust them to our own environment. That is one. Our combat commanders school, I would say it's so ruthless in assessment for the pilots that it's difficult to graduate from there if you are a mediocre. So these are the things. Similarly, on equipment side, if we have sanctions, etc., then a lot of indigenous developments are done by the Pakistan Air Force. And a good example is that Pakistan Air Force is the only Air Force which is partnering at development of an aircraft, JF-17.
Right, General Raza, how are the armed forces collectively keeping themselves prepared and well equipped with the changing times, the changing circumstances and the requirements?
Okay, I think today I would say that because of our full spectrum deterrence, not only conventional, nuclear, missile, despite the shortage of our resources, our defenses that way are impregnable. But now our adversaries and enemies are targeting our minds, particularly the minds of the youth, through the fifth generation warfare or the hybrid warfare, where they are trying to bring a division between the people of Pakistan and the armed forces of Pakistan. That is one. They are trying, now to discredit the armed forces and the institution of Pakistan. They are trying, to discredit, the two-nation theory through fake news, through the misuse of social media, and attacking our digital domain, which I think is the most dangerous kind of, I would say, challenge for Pakistan to overcome. And I think the people of Pakistan, the government, are well aware of all this, and I'm sure they are going to thwart those efforts as well.
Lieutenant General Retired Raza Mohammad Khan, former President of the National Defence University, thank you very much for taking time out. Admiral, please go ahead. Unfortunately, we are short of time.
Okay, fine.
Please give your last closing comments. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'll comment on the same one. Unfortunately, social media or the modern IT and this WhatsApp, I feel it can't be stopped, but it can be countered. And my advice on another channel I gave this morning is that my appeal to the youth is, who their mind they are trying to poison, okay, for God's sake, when you get a news, fact checking is the most important. 80% it is disinformation. So by all means, you have your mind, you have to react, but for God's sake, check what is the source, where does it originate from, what does it say, and kindly check it 2 times before your
Before
reaction.
spreading it further, they should duly verify that.
Oh, verify,
the
absolutely.
sources of it. Vice Admiral retired Ahmad Tasnim, 1965 war veteran. Thank you very much for being with us
Thank
on
you
the
very
show
much.
tonight.
Thank you very much.
Air Marshal retired Ashfaque, Director of the Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. Thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Thank you for being with us.